What's good, YouTube? Welcome back. Today it is the LazyDaze channel and we're back at it again with some more history reaction for you guys today, and we're back on the Kings and Generals content for you, and we're doing the 100 Years War, and we're doing episode 5, Siege of Orleans, 1429. Joan of Arc saves France. We're really enjoying this series over here and finding out more about the French and English history and the 100 Years War itself. We're looking forward to finding out some more about Joan of Arc in this episode, as it seems like she might be the main focus point. So we're looking forward to that. If you guys are enjoying our content, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you haven't already, head over to Kings and Generals page. A link for their content will be in the description box down below. But we're just going to jump straight into this one.
Let's do this.
The third phase of the 100 Years' War started just as decisively as the first had, with a decisive and shocking victory for the English over France's army on the field of Agincourt. However, this undeniable triumph was just the beginning of war rather than the end of one, and King Henry V had a lot of work to do if he was to make his conquest of France the permanent one he now sought. Welcome to our 5th video on the climactic medieval conflict between England and France, and witness how the tide began to turn once again under the standard of a single young woman, Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc saved France from foreign occupation, while the sponsor of this video and our most loyal Henry V sailed from Calais in late 1415. He left a deeply shocked France behind him. With the royal army destroyed, and much of the Armagnac faction leadership with it, the civil war appeared as though it was only going to get worse. Back in England, the jubilant king didn't bask in his success for long, and immediately began raising funds, mustering troops, and assembling a great navy for a follow-up attack on France, while at the same time depriving the divided enemy kingdom of its allies. Aiming to heal the Western Schism, Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund arrived in England in early 1416, but ended up forming an alliance with Henry and denouncing France instead. At sea, the king's commanders crushed the Franco-Genoese fleet in 1416 and 1417, leaving the channel open for another crossing. By the middle of that year, Henry had his army together and sailed to Normandy, this time going to conquer it entirely. On September 20th, the dominoes began to topple as Ken surrendered after a short siege. No relief was anywhere close, because any royal force which might have assisted was busy facing off against the Burgundians. Next to fall was the great Norman capital at Rouen. Henry put France's second city to siege at the end of July 1418, and after a brutal siege lasting over half a year, its garrison finally surrendered. With that, almost every other castle in
the writing on the paper.
Yeah. Just read that quickly.
Henry refused to aid 12,000 expelled residents left to starve between the city walls and the English lines. Fucking hell.
Jesus.
I can't understand it though.
I do get it, but imagine being stuck in the middle of the castle that you've just been thrown out of and the people coming to take that castle. They were savage back in the day.
They were
mate.
savage. I'd try and get past the line. I don't know.
I'd probably try and sneak back in the castle.
No, I'd try and F off somewhere.
Yeah?
Yeah, get around the whole thing. I don't want to be in the castle when the army savage is here.
Yeah, no, good point.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I want to be outside of those walls, but I don't want to be stuck between them.
Yeah,
like,
no.
Yeah. I guess you don't really have a choice of where you go.
No, you don't. That's the problem.
Its garrison finally surrendered. With that, almost every other castle in the duchy surrendered, and by the turn of the decade, Normandy was under English control for the first time in 2 centuries. This frighteningly quick conquest horrified both the Armagnacs and Burgundians. Despite the latter's covert talks with Henry V, they realized such a full conquest wouldn't benefit them at all. Realizing something had to be done, both John the Fearless and France's new Dauphin, the future Charles VII, agreed to negotiate. However, when the Duke of Burgundy knelt before his Valois prince, Armagnac retainers accompanying Charles suddenly...
So after the assassination John the Fearless son and successor Philip the Good formed an alliance with the English which would prolong the 100 Years' War for decades.
Oh.
Suddenly came forward and hacked John the Fearless to death. Revenge for Louis of Orleans' death over a decade before. Whatever the motive, it was a disaster for France. As Francis I stated a century later when shown the mutilated skull of the dead Duke, "This is the hole through which the English entered France." Wide swaths of the kingdom burst into uproar or panic at the Armagnacs' brutal murder of John. But when the news reached his son and heir, Philippe, in Flanders, he is said to have thrown himself on his bed, teeth grinding in grief and rage. Seething and eager for revenge, the new Duke of Burgundy formed an alliance with Henry V. The former would recognize the English king's claim to the throne of France, while the latter ensured Philippe's territories were enlarged and secure. This was the last straw. Battered by the English invasion and tired of civil war, the barely lucid Charles VI signed the Treaty of Troyes on May 21, 1420. Henry V would be heir and regent of France. He would marry the Mad King's daughter, Catherine of Valois, and their child would be king as well. After capturing a few more towns loyal to the Dauphin, Henry spent Christmas in Paris before going back to England and crowning Catherine his queen. While this was happening, Thomas, Duke of Clarence, was defeated and killed at Bourget during March 1421, a defeat which convinced Brittany to defect to the Dauphin's reduced kingdom. In October, however, Henry returned to France and took a few castles at Dreux, Vendôme and Beaugency before putting Meaux to siege. It was there that King Henry fell ill with his army, but insisted on staying with the troops, which he did until the city fell in May 1422. Though he returned to Paris, the king fell deeper into sickness and began to take measures for the succession, naming Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, regent in England, while his brother, the Duke of Bedford, would lead in France in the name of the newborn Henry VI.
Okay.
England's great Lancastrian king, perhaps the greatest in the country's history, died at Vincennes on August 31st, 1422, at the age of just 35. The Mad King Charles VI finally died only 2 months later, and his son declared himself the king. Nevertheless, all of France north of the Loire came under Anglo-Burgundian rule, while his son only retained the loyalty of the south with a moving court. After an indecisive campaign of sieges, Bedford and his second-in-command Salisbury won a victory in 1424 at the Battle of Verneuil, widely seen as a second Agincourt, and this greatly increased the regent's prestige.
Yeah.
Oh.
Unfortunately,
John II was taken prisoner.
One sec, I'll go back to So the Scottish army was destroyed. The
Subtitle.
Yeah, I'll take it off quick.
Scottish army was almost destroyed.
The Earls of Dongas and Buckingham were killed. Many French nobles, like John II, Duke of
Alencourt,
were taken prisoner. So it's another sort of just big battle.
God blimey.
second Agincourt, and this greatly increased the regent's prestige. Unfortunately, Gloucester's blundering meant that Bedford was forced to return to England for 2 years to put things straight, and only sailed back to France in March 1427. He and Salisbury now started planning a campaign to capture Orléans, the key to the Loire. If this great riverine linchpin was conquered, the English could easily launch further attacks to knock the Dauphin out for good. After capturing more than 40 towns and fortresses along the way, Salisbury approached Orléans in early October 1428, at the time garrisoned by 2,400 regular soldiers and a further 3,000 militia. A contingent of the English army under Suffolk captured both Jargeau and Châteauneuf to isolate the city, while Salisbury encamped opposite French defences on the southern end of Orléans' 350-metre-long bridge. He began an initial artillery bombardment on the 17th, and 4 days later ordered his men to storm the fortified gatehouse known as Les Tourelles. This attack was driven away by the defenders after each side took around 200 losses, with the Dauphinist French being constantly resupplied with food, drink and arms by the city's women. When the direct attack failed, Salisbury abandoned this approach and instead sent sappers to undermine the foundations. Realizing this was happening, the Guardians of Les Tourelles retreated deeper into the city on the night of October 23rd, destroying a small part of the bridge behind them. The fall of this fortification seemed like Orleans' doom, but as the aggressive Salisbury climbed atop Les Tourelles to decide where to attack next, a stray cannonball clattered through the window, killed one of his companions, and flung an iron bar at the Earl, slicing half his face off. Incapacitated and in agony, he was replaced by William, Earl of Suffolk, before dying a week later. The more cautious Suffolk decided on a prolonged siege, and in the next week, the English began constructing siege works. At about the same time, Orleans received some additional reinforcements from the southeast. The city was too large to be entirely cut off by such a small force. The city's defenders started bracing for an extended engagement, as well as burning and tearing down the suburbs outside the walls, depriving the English of cover and winter quarters by doing so. Starting on November 8th, English boats began ferrying men across the Loire and constructing siege positions to the north and west of the city. The French responded with a few unsuccessful sorties, and to compound these failures, by the turn of December, the besiegers had been reinforced. While the northern bank siege works were being constructed, the English launched a failed probing assault across the broken Loire Bridge. The defenders responded with massive 26-pound shots from a new bombard, and by completing the levelling of their suburbs. As 1429 began, Orleans' would-be captors shifted focus to the now fortified north bank, with a number of easily repelled assaults on the Porte Renard in January. The loose nature of the encirclement also allowed a supply convoy, including hundreds of sheep and pigs, to reach the city.
I'm surprised
as gallant resistance continued.
I am surprised that they haven't sort of got a small contingency to go round and have a look over that side.
Yeah, not even like you don't have to cover it off completely, but a small contingent,
just a few scouts to see what's going on,
to pick off any stragglers and
or slow it down.
And cause harassment enough that they have to keep it in mind that if they're going to get reinforcements, then they're going to have to do a couple more things because they might get hit. I completely agree with that. Like, you don't have the ability to completely encircle it, but you definitely need to put aggression forces on those other tracks and those other routes. Like guerrilla warfare, independent. We trust you to act on your own and just sort of, pick people off when you can.
Continued, 200 men of the garrison slipped out of Orleans and joined a 3,000-strong French force at Blois. Having received reports of an enemy supply caravan approaching from Paris to resupply the besiegers, they marched to intercept near Rouvray. However, when the French and Scots under Clermont found the 1,500-strong caravan on February 12th, their assault over the open country was repulsed and counterattacked from behind a ring of supply wagons. 400 of the Dauphin's troops, mainly Scots, were killed, and Clermont subsequently withdrew to Tours along with a number of other commanders certain of defeat. At Chinon, Charles was so demoralized by the grand city's seemingly inevitable fall that he considered abandoning his kingdom completely. However, events many hundreds of miles to the east were about to thoroughly rejuvenate the French cause. 3 years before, a 15-year-old girl named Joan began hearing voices, and by 1428 became convinced she was being granted a task from God, delivered by the Archangel Michael in addition.
Joan
stated that she experienced her first vision in 1425 at the age of 13. When she was in her father's garden, she said she cried when the saints left, as they were so beautiful. So the saints left,
In addition to Saints Margaret and Catherine, her task, to lead an army against the English so that Orleans might be relieved, and to have the Dauphin traditionally crowned as Charles VII in Rhos Cathedral, where Louis the Pious had succeeded to the Frankish throne 6 centuries earlier. Through aid from Robert de Baudricourt, a pro-Valois commander in Vaucouleurs, Joan undertook a dangerous journey to Chinon and then to Poitiers, where her faith was declared true and her virginity assured. To test whether this woman's extraordinary claims were true, she would be sent to Orléans in an attempt to break the siege. After being granted armor, horses, a special banner, and supposedly finding a legendary sword, she went to Blois and joined a gathering relief force. Upon her arrival, the deflated mood among French soldiers and officers immediately began changing at her holy presence. Leaders who had withdrawn from the siege previously, such as Clermont, or who had avoided getting involved at all, now rallied to the cause, inspired by Joan's patriotic mission. While the Dauphin's army mustered, the lull at Orléans, following Rouvray, allowed English forces, who were aware that a relief attempt was incoming, to construct a number of formidable fortifications: the Bastille de Saint-Loup to the east, the Boulevard de la Pressoir on April 9th, the Bastille Saint-Pouer on the 15th, and Bastille de Saint-Jean-le-Blanc 5 days later. Notably, the new English commander, Glasdale, created an external earthen rampart outside Les Tourelles, making it into a citadel. Joan and her relief force set out for Orléans on the 26th, and after a miraculous crossing of the Loire at Chessy and bypassing Saint-Loup without opposition, entered the city through its Burgundian gate 3 days after leaving Blois. After resting for the night, Joan was eager to go on the attack. Because one wasn't planned for that day, she walked across the Loire bridge to the Bellecois stronghold and asked the English to lift the siege. Glasdale shouted back that she was a mere cowherd and they would burn her if she was captured. Nevertheless, Joan's threat to kill all prisoners their forces had taken if her heralds were not released worked, and they were indeed set free. Also on that day, a lengthy skirmish was fought when the French commander La Hire sortied out against the northern English fortification at Saint-Pouer, but was eventually forced back inside. This inability led the overall defending leader, Jean de Dunois, the bastard of Orléans, to slip out of the city on May 1st and return to Blois, where he sought reinforcements. While he was gone, Joan didn't remain inactive. She rejuvenated the morale of Orléans' long-besieged citizens, who crowded to meet her and give their maid gifts, while also performing military reconnaissance against Glasdale's positions to see which were weak and which were strong. Dunois returned on May 4th with much-needed reinforcements, and shortly after, an attack began spontaneously on England's eastern fort at Saint-Loup by 1,500 troops. Joan was resting at the time, but when informed, either by an angel's voice or any of the other mortal voices in the city, rode out as swiftly and eagerly as possible to join the attack. For 3 grueling hours, Joan inspired her warriors to fight. Despite fierce resistance by the English garrison, the French soldiers managed to finally capture and raze Saint-Loup to the joy of Orléans' people. Despite her jubilation at the victory, Joan of Arc wept for the 140 slain English soldiers who had died without confession. Still, the officers remained.
Is she nuts? Is she crazy?
This Joan of Arc story, right?
Yeah.
I'm really quite intrigued about this.
Yeah.
Because she was 13 when she first had the vision.
Yeah.
Of seeing the 2 saints leave because they were so beautiful.
Yeah.
And then she's 15, she's eager to get involved and fight.
More rally people.
Yeah. And then she's also, and I can understand the weeping.
Yeah.
Of the English soldiers.
Especially if she's still 15.
Yeah, this is all quite like blah.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It is, isn't it?
Interesting. Yeah. Like
having like the fact that she rode down to a place and was like, okay, let's see if you're actually telling the truth, and then they were like, okay.
Yeah, but that's.
Yeah, but this is back in a different time.
Yeah. Like it's hard to say, like.
But it is like a really.
It is hard to say
interesting
if she
thing.
knew if she was actually thought she was having visions, or if she knew this was a way to rally people. That's what I'm interested in. Now, do you think she was actually she believed in all this and she was doing it because she believed in it, or do you think that she was clever enough to know that if she spoke this way and rallied the people this way, that this was the best way to get the result she wanted?
Possibly, yeah.
So that'd be my interesting. Is she manipulating the situation knowing she's manipulating the situation, or is she just acting on her beliefs which has caused this situation? That's what I'm interested in.
It's a really strong argument that for what's going on and what's being said.
Cautious, but this was shattered when news came from Paris of a large incoming Anglo-Burgundian relief army led by John Falstaff. It was now clear that the siege had to be broken before it got to Orléans, or all their bravery would be for nothing. On the 5th, French forces crossed the Loire in order to attack Saint-Jean-le-Blanc, an earthen fortification protecting Les Tourelles. But when the English withdrew to the gatehouse itself, the defenders managed to occupy the outlying position. The next day, Joan crossed the Loire again, pushing the troops forward against the Bastille des Augustins. After a ferocious clash in which the French had to use a cannon to take down a particularly big Englishman, they overran the fortress. Glasdale's remaining...
I'm sorry. Play that back again.
They said Englishman, right?
A particularly big Englishman.
They didn't use a cannon to take out one person. I don't believe
After a
it.
ferocious clash in which the French had to use a cannon to take down a particularly big Englishman.
I can believe that. I can solely believe that there was one geezer at that part of the army in the English that was just like an animal.
No, they've got to be talking about a fortification or something.
No, he's an Englishman. Like an actual English... This guy's massive. It's like Little John from Robin Hood.
Oh, I am just thinking of some dense like mountain. Like the mountain,
yeah. You see, like, do you know when people name a dog Tiny and it turns out to be some behemoth? It's that.
The one that's just going to bite your face off.
Oh, mate.
Like, yeah.
Oh, mate, that is so... I want to know more about that.
They brought a cannon to take down an Englishman. It's still sinking in. Like, I'm still under the belief that there's a mistake to be made.
I want to know how big this geezer was.
It can't be a person.
It's got...
It can't be.
I'm going to look into this, mate. I'm going to look into this.
Englishmen. They overran the fortress. Glasdale's remaining troops retreated behind the boulevard protecting Les Tourelles. With divine favour seemingly on their side and momentum at their back, the French attacked Les Tourelles' outer defences on the 7th by escalade, but were repelled at first with heavy losses. During the fighting, Joan herself was even struck between the shoulder and neck by an English arrow, but fought on nonetheless.
Okay.
After going off to pray in a nearby vineyard for guidance, Joan of Arc returned with her banner in hand, motivating the French to a final attack in which they managed to drive the besiegers from the fortification in front of the Les Tourelles gate. The Maid of Orléans called on Glasdale to surrender, but he refused. When he subsequently attempted to lead his remaining troops across the drawbridge and to the inner gatehouse, the timber cracked under the weight of so many soldiers and dropped many into the Loire. Glasdale himself, clad in heavy armour along with many of his men, drowned.
Shit.
Morale inside the inner fortress crumbled after this loss, and the surviving English inside quickly surrendered. On the northern Loire bank, the remaining English troops abandoned their siege lines and formed up in two large battle formations, challenging the French to open battle. When Joan and the other commanders lined up in front of them and prepared for battle, however, the besiegers lost their nerve and turned to march away. Their army split, one group moving to garrison Jargeau, while another went to Man Mung, all the way being harried by French troops who disobeyed orders to ride them down. After 210 days, the siege of Orléans was over.
They disobeyed orders to ride them down.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means that they refused to ride them down. I think it's saying that these men were refusing to
ride
just
them down,
run us over
Yeah.
because we were leaving. I think if someone knows about that, let us know if that's what it was.
I do think that is what it was.
Yeah.
But what they did do was some people harassed them instead.
Yeah. I mean, you're better off being harassed than murdered, really, on a retreat.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'd like to know a bit more about that.
The siege of Orléans was over. The Dauphin's loyal, capable army had held firm, and Joan of Arc was enshrined forever in history as the Maid of Orléans. Joan pushed for an immediate advance to crown Charles, but the French commanders claimed that with the English still holding castles on the Loire, they weren't yet in a position to do that. So in mid-June, the army, with an enthusiastic Joan of Arc in tow, began retaking them one by one. Jargeau fell on the 12th, Beaugency on the eve of the 17th, and then finally Meung at dawn on the 18th. The remaining English forces retreated north and united with Talbot's southward marching relief army, bringing their strength up to around 5,000. Hotly pursued by Joan and the 6,000 French troops, the English field army was decisively defeated in the Battle of Patay, dispelling the myth of invincibility of England's armies in the field for good. Such a great victory in the open field finally encouraged the Dauphin to accompany Joan of Arc and his newly enlarged 12,000-strong army in a march towards Reims. There on July 17, 1429, the long-beleaguered son of Charles the Mad was crowned as Charles VII in the city's grand cathedral, as the Maid of Orléans stood at his side, holy banner in hand. This was militarily insignificant, but a propaganda triumph. As the Burgundian supporter Enguerrand de Montrelet stated soon after this seminal moment, the French now believed that God was against the English. The story of Joan of Arc and the continued French resurgence will continue, so make sure you are...
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to finding out.
Mate, I was not aware that she took an arrow
and
still kept going.
Like from the shoulder
to between the necks. Yeah, she took an arrow,
yeah.
went to a vineyard, prayed, come back and was like, right, let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Well, that's was mad. Joan of Arc. I'm very happy that I found out some more information about that. Oh my indeed. We enjoy learning more on this channel. So if you guys are enjoying our reactions, then please like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and we will catch you in the next video.
See you in a bit.